So I'm delighted now to have a short informal chat with the winner of our second prize in this first online June Fest short story competition of 2020, which I was delighted to judge. And the winner of the second prize for the competition is Rose Malone, and her story was called The Safe House. And when the June Fest committee sent me the names of the winners, I was absolutely thrilled because Rose and I have actually met before. We've met a couple of times at various literary events throughout the county. And one of the most recent times that I met Rose was when she was helping to launch a beautiful anthology of work that I did the speech for at the launch, and it was called Krishla Kildara, and it's a product of NACE Creative Writers Group. So because that's how I remember Rose, I'd like to just ask her, how important, Rose, do you feel it is for you, or in general, to have a group of creative-minded people together like you have at the NACE Creative Writers Group? Did you feel it was a huge benefit to you, or would you recommend it to people? How did you find the group? Anything at all you'd like to tell us about the communal experience of being in a writing group?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. It was hugely important to me as a very late starter in creative writing. And while writing itself is an isolated, it can be a lonely activity, it's really great to be in a group that is supportive, but at the same time will give you some critical feedback. A group that tells you everything is wonderful doesn't get you very far, but a group that is accepting and will accept, that they're seeing a draft and so on, is just such a wonderful bonus for any writer, I think. I know some people don't find that, but for me, that was really important. And the NACE group was very welcoming. It's grown now to be a very big group. And we've been meeting on Skype since lockdown.
Oh.
We haven't been able to meet in person since last February, I suppose. I think that would have been the last meeting we had. And ever since then, we've met. We wouldn't be able to do it in a socially distanced way. So since then, we've done it on Skype. And we do it just with audio, no video. So it can be exhausting to do a 2.5-hour meeting on Skype with no vision, but it still is greatly supportive. And I think it was supportive through COVID as well, to be in touch with fellow writers. And I certainly workshopped some of the earlier drafts of the story, of the Safe House story, with the group.
Oh, I was wondering if you had, yes. And they gave you then positive feedback, and that gave you the confidence to stick it into the competition.
Yeah, it did. I didn't agree with everything everybody said, because sometimes different people will give you contradictory advice, and you still have to use your judgment. And for me, one of the difficulties, I think, was the time in which it was set, because it had to be before the Good Friday Agreement, and that meant it had to be authentic to that time. And in my mind, it was in the maybe early 90s, early to mid 90s.
Right.
Initially, I know some people thought it would have been maybe the 70s or the 80s. And I'm not sure that I totally resolved that with it, but I was hoping that people would be able to understand where I was coming from with that. But it sets up these questions in your mind. It's not so much that people will give you different words, but it sets up questions in your mind about, well, how have I shown that? Can I do it a different way? What little product can I put in that'll give me a sense of the time or the place or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's very important when you are writing and when you're showing work to people at a very early stage of its creation. It's very important not to be distracted from the main point of the work. And it's very easy to over edit something, to fiddle around with the words and the commas and the full stops, but to lose the impact of the story. So I think when you're in a group, it's really important that the advice is non-directive, rather than saying, I would take out that word and replace it with this word, but to have a conversation about authentic speech patterns, or is this what might have happened, or why have you expressed something in this way? Because when you have a group, and when I met you, there were probably 12 or 14 people in the group already. So, so if it's got larger again, you're going to get a lot of conflicting opinions. And it is important, I think, when you're starting off, to have the confidence to say, I hear you, I appreciate you, thank you for your advice. And then to take it on board, but to always remember that it's your story, it's your piece of work, and it's important that it does what you want it to do. If someone else thinks they could approach the theme better, let them write their own story. That's how I always feel about it, Do you find that the creative aspect of writing, has it been a help to you during lockdown? Have you been able to continue working? A lot of writers have said that they have felt stuck, or that they have been really unproductive. And then you get other people who say they've never worked as hard in their life and they've never achieved as much. I'm in the stuck category. I've done very little with the 6 months. And have you had any success?
I'd be somewhere in between. I found it very difficult. In the first lockdown, I was living on my own, and I sort of thought I have loads of time. It's this feeling of guilt. I should be writing. I have loads and loads of time, and yet I have a draft of a novel done, and I was trying to edit it, and I got really stuck, completely stuck at something like chapter 14, and I couldn't see any way out of it. This time around, I'm in a bubble, and I'm not on my own, and that makes it easier. We have a certain structure in the day, and I try and either write or read every morning. And sometimes, if I can't write, I just read. And I've written more poetry, I suppose. Certainly, in the first lockdown, I wrote a sequence of about 14 poems.
Rose, you're making me feel very guilty. But you're making me feel dreadful.
Not at all. A very variable quality now, I would have to say. Variable quality. But sometimes when you can't use one genre, it sometimes helps to do something else. I still can't bear. I did finish I think the third or fourth draft of the novel. I've lost count at this stage, and I don't want to look at it again.
And do you want to give us a teeny tiny hint of whether that novel is in any way related to the story that you're about to read?
Not at all. Not at all. It's a story about a book club.
Oh, all the secrets are coming out. Very good.
Well, not my book club.
Oh, yeah, that's what they always say. Oh, total fiction.
Nothing like mine. Yeah.
It was absolutely lovely to see you again. It was an absolute joy when your name popped up on the list, and I thought, my goodness, I've chosen Rose, and that's lovely, because I didn't know Adam, and although I had met Helen before, I didn't put the two pieces of work together, so I didn't realize that I had encountered Helen's work before, but I did straight away recognize you and your work after I had got your name, and I was delighted. So congratulations, and the very best luck with the novel. I look forward to reading that, and please God, we will all soon be meeting face to face one of these days. And if you would like to give us not too much of your story, because it's going to be published in the Leinster Leader, but if you'd like to give us a minute or two, that would be lovely. Thank you.
I think what I might do is read the first sentence and then skip on to the bit where she meets, where the man who looks like a skeleton has come in. So it's called Safe House. They always come at night, and I never hear them arrive. The person speaking is a teenage girl. And after a page, she goes on, the fellow who came last Friday was different. For a start off, he came during the day when I was at school. I arrived home to find him sitting at the kitchen table with Mum. At first, I didn't realise he was an on the run because he looked so respectable, kind of like a priest. He had a very long, pale face and silver hair. It was hard not to look at his fingers. They were pure white and very bony, so that he looked like a living skeleton. He had a cigarette between finger and thumb, and he flicked the ash off so elegantly, like someone in a black and white movie. Mum was smoking as well, and a cut-glass ashtray was halfway between them. The whole scene was so strange and surreal, I couldn't believe it for a minute. Mum allowing smoking, and smoking herself, in the kitchen. And where did she even get that ashtray? She was sitting at the end of the table at right angles to the man, and it took me a full minute to appreciate the utter oddness of the whole thing. No tracky bottoms for her today. She was wearing a skirt and tights. I didn't know she owned a pair of tights, and sheer tights at that. And she was sitting back in her chair with her legs crossed. One of her shoes was slipping off, and she kept doing a sort of lunge forward to push it back on. Her top was loose, and when she bent forward, he could have got an eyeful, but he seemed to be in a kind of trance with his eyes fixed on a spot on the far wall. She was talking in a funny voice, higher than usual and sort of posh, and she laughed a lot. Her hair was up in a messy bun, and she kept flicking bits of it off her face. She asked him some question, and he didn't answer, so she touched his arm. He jumped like he'd been burnt, cupped a hand behind his ear and said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't quite catch that," in a posh northern accent. He seemed to be straining to hear what she was saying, and then he noticed me. Mum looked up at the same time and said, "Oh, there you are," as though I was something she had mislaid. She looked hard at me, and he looked hard at me, and the look in his eyes was not lascivious. It was a gaze of pure terror. "This is my ewe lamb," Mum said, gesturing at me. "Aisling. She's in 5th year in St. Fidelma's. Of course, I was barely out of school myself when I had her." "Sure, if you were 27 during the leaving." "Aisling," the man said. Then he said something in Irish. I'm actually not bad at Irish, but his way of saying it was funny, all sort of twisted and dragged out, so I didn't have a clue. I gave a half smile and turned towards Mum, but she had her eyes fixed on the man. "I'd introduce you, but," she said to him. His face contorted for a second. "No names, no pack drill," he said, whatever that meant. I needed to get her attention. "I'm starving," I said. There was a gorgeous smell of cooking. Mum must have made her famous lasagna, my absolute favourite. Then I saw the plates. 2 dinner plates on the table, smeared with tomato and meat and melted cheese. I looked around and saw the lasagna dish upside down on the draining board. Spotless. She gave him my favourite dinner. Maybe there were leftovers in the fridge. Mum followed my gaze and had the grace to look sheepish. "You could go to the chipper," she said. "Take the money from my purse and get some ice cream as well." I drew breath to complain, but she glared at me. The man stubbed out a cigarette and immediately slid another one out of the packet and lit it. His hand shook and he knocked ash over the table. I took the money and got out of there as quick as I could. The air was different when I came out, cleaner and somehow brighter, even though the street lights were just coming on. I nearly skipped along like a little kid. I had to stop at the curb to let a car turn into the side road. It was a blue car, a Ford Mondeo, 2 men with short hair. I pretended to myself that I hadn't seen it. The chipper was full of people queuing, and I found it hard to stand still. My feet kept wanting to do a little jig, and my fingers kept unbuttoning and buttoning my coat. I went over a couple of different scenarios in my head. I'd come home, the blue car would be gone, the skeleton man would be gone, Dad would come in, and we'd all have ice cream together. We'd listen to the news, and Dad would swear at it, and then I'd make a start on my weekend homework. That was the fairy tale scenario. There was another scenario where Dad came home and Mum and the man were hugging and kissing, and Dad went crazy. There was a lot of shouting, maybe blood. And then there was the possibility of mum and dad and the man and me all eating our tea at the table, and a big loud knock coming to the door, and the men from the blue car coming in, also a lot of shouting, and dad and the skeleton man being taken away. These films kept playing and playing in my head with variations. Sometimes the skeleton man had a gun. Sometimes the men from the car had a gun. Then all the films got tangled up together, but they always ended with screeching and shouting and blood. So I'll leave that.
Very good. Well, that's definitely given us a good taster of what's going on in that story. So nothing remains to say except congratulations. And I very much look forward to seeing you at the workshop in February, please God.
Thank you so much.
If COVID allows.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thanks
God.
so much, and thanks for
care.
such a supportive interview.
Thank you.